Hi, and welcome to Belated Binge Harry Potter, the re-binge podcast that doesn't take itself or the books too seriously. I'm Zach, your host, revisiting some of the most iconic series in recent memory that I nearly missed, like Harry Potter, which, despite being the same age as movie Harry, I didn't read until my mid-20s. Today is a bit of a retrospective episode because I realized that after we finished Chamber of Secrets, we never did a book wrap up, or in our case, give away any bingies. Let's do it.
The Belated Binge Podcast.
Let's get into some bingies for Chamber of Secrets. What are bingies, you might be asking yourself? Well, if you happen to be picturing Michael Scott, speaking of The Office, emceeing Dwight on the production tables, giving away these silly, meaningless awards to characters on The Office while Pam's getting tanked and falling over and making out with Jim, that's exactly what we're doing here, minus the making out part, because I'm alone in my basement. So let's once again start it off the only way that feels appropriate. First, by setting the scene. You're minding your own business at your local Chili's. You had a long day at work, and you're on your third light beer because you're flat broke and you don't care to prove that you're a beer snob. Your half rack of ribs has just arrived. It's still steaming on the plate. You tuck your napkin into your shirt because you only have 3 work shirts, and you care more about not buying a 4th than what anybody thinks about you. You pick up that barbecue-covered slab of meat and bone, or the impossible version for the vegetarians. That's probably a thing. And just as you lift it to your fully just wide open jaws, you see a strange man holding a microphone with the hood pulled up of his all-black zip-up hoodie, and an even stranger looking dude in a mustard-colored shirt starts playing music. And then you hear the Bingies. How can I explain it? I was late to come around, so we're calling it belated. It's never been debated because the binge is underrated, but to anybody here, I'm so happy that you made it. Now first, before the best and worst, let's remember what has happened in the chapters that you heard. Remember Harry Potter? He's the hero from our first book. This one goes pretty much the same on your first look. It starts with a pan that was flying at his head. He's abused by his family. They don't even try to pretend. There's a mishap with a cake thanks to Dobby the house elf. Ron and the twins have to break him out like a jail cell. Dobby seals the gate so Harry can't get on the train, so he and Ron steal a car. It flies like a plane. They get in a fight when they land, and they lose to a tree, but somehow they made it, well, except for Ron's wand, in one piece. There's a new teacher this year who's a narcissistic prick, and the racist undertones take over pretty quick. There's a deadly monster roaming the halls with blood-written messages covering the walls. Everybody thinks it's Harry. He's the one. He must be evil. He can speak Parseltongue. That's talking to snakes, by the way. No Buggleborn is safe. Even Hermione ends up petrified after solving the case. And when Ron's little sister Ginny's taken to the chamber, Harry has to go alone through the plumbing to save her. That's because Lockhart tried to take the memories from kids, but he used Ron's wand. That's been snapped like a twig. Now he's lost his mind, and Harry's surprised when he finds the ghost of Tom Riddle next to Ginny deep inside the Chamber of Secrets where the monster is kept, a giant snake with a stare that causes, well, death. Fox the Phoenix comes through in the clutch, and Harry manages to save us again from Voldemort's touch. We foreshadow a Horcrux and set Dobby free with a sock, and now we're giving out awards that mean, well, not a lot. You down with the Bingies? Yeah, you know me. You down with the Bingies? Yeah, you know me. You down with, well, I think the joke landed. Let's give away some Bingie awards for Chamber of Secrets. Our first character award category is Best Protagonist from this book. And this is Hermione. She basically does everything in this book, even though she spends half of it in the hospital wing, either as a cat or petrified. Still, Harry and Ron, along with all the teachers and the most powerful wizard in the world, couldn't solve this mystery, but she could from the hospital wing. Don't get me started on how this is still a book for children, despite how just gruesome and terrifying the underlying plot is, but Hermione is the GOAT of this book, and you're not going to convince me otherwise. Our next character award is for Best Antagonist. And step on up, Voldemort, particularly Tom Riddle. I wanted to do something clever here, but the fact that he literally almost took down Hogwarts and like the whole wizarding world basically and came back to life through a book with magic that he did as a teenager, when you peel back the children's audience, this is terrifying. He is preying on the insecurities of an 11-year-old child, parasitically feeding off of her soul to strengthen his own. He's possessing her and forcing her into committing heinous acts against her classmates and her friends, and he nearly sucks the soul and life force from her very body and into his own, before Harry comes clumsily saving the day thanks to Dumbledore's bird. It's the darkest, most insidious magic when you really think about it, and maybe the darkest magic that we see in the entire series. And if that's not an antagonist, I guess you could go with Lucius, or I guess you could go with Draco. Sure. All right. Those are the two obviously biggest ones from a character standpoint. So let's jump on down to Best Supporting Role. And this is Ron. It's Ron. He's kind of dumb, and his plans are not great. But damn it, he is down for the cause and ready to fuck around and find out with Harry all book long. He is the driving force of saving Harry from the Dursleys, which is quite literally hell on earth for him. He gets them to Hogwarts in the flying car as a 12-year-old, and they don't die somehow. He manages not to also kill anyone and make it through the entire year with his broken ass hand-me-down wand. He is basically just flapping around a stick, and ironically, that stick is the ultimately what saves their lives and memories and saves Ginny and by extension everyone else by the end of this story. But thanks, Ron, and maybe thanks to your family for being poor and not getting you a new wand. Maybe. People aren't going to like that, I don't think. He doesn't turn on Harry when the rest of the school does, and he will fight a motherfucker over it. And he did the polyjuice stuff. He faced his biggest fear when the giant hell spiders tried to eat them. He faced Lockhart down. He went down to try and find the chamber and save Ginny, and he was just a good bro and an awesome supportive friend throughout this whole book, which makes him the best supporting character in my book. Ron Love. Okay. Our next character award. Most underrated character. This one's Harry. I'm sorry. I know he's the main character, and he's the hero of the story. He shouldn't be underrated in any way or whatever, but I also know that nobody picks him as their favorite character. Nobody is going to agree that I'm even calling him underrated here. But the book starts with physical abuse, psychological abuse, and he's literally being malnourished and imprisoned in his aunt and uncle's home who hate him. Then his letters from the only people on the planet who have ever shown him any semblance of affection and happiness are being stolen from him, so that he believes that they aren't coming and that people may have forgotten about him or don't actually care about him, while he is isolated in literal hell. Then the one thing that he cares about in his life, his one escape from said hell, is nearly taken from him when he can't get to Hogwarts. Then, When he does get to Hogwarts, he's nearly beat to death by a tree, nearly expelled from the place he loves most, and then he starts hearing voices and fearing that he'll be taken away from this place for being freaking crazy. And then, if that's not enough, the whole school turns on him and thinks he's an evil wizard, openly blaming and tormenting him about being a racist dark wizard, heir of Slytherin. And then a grown-ass man tries to attack and wipe his memory and ability to function as a human. And then he is nearly murdered by a giant snake monster and a Horcrux soul of the serial killer that killed his parents and has been trying to kill him his entire life, and he still gives enough of a shit to save the day and save the lives of all these shitty kids who accused him of being evil all year. And his biggest concern the whole time is if he's actually got it in him to not only be like confused, crazy, what is happening to me, but is he actually secretly a jaded dark wizard, and if he's even worthy of being a good guy. That's nuts. I'm sorry. And he doesn't get enough credit, especially in this book, which I think makes him underrated. And now we're going to move away from characters a little bit. We're going to do some, like, story, I guess, awards for a few minutes here. Starting with best plot development. And I don't want to go with the biggest obvious things with these. I've tried not to. I know some of these, when it's like character driven, it's a little hard to avoid focusing on the characters we spend the most time with a lot of times. So I want to just preface that. But I do, especially with the writing portion and the story portion and the arcs and plot and that kind of stuff, I try not to just say like, oh man, the biggest plot development is, the diary. That's the main plot development throughout the story of the book. That was its purpose. So I'm going to go with Dobby here. He's annoying as shit, but he starts off trying to keep Harry away from Hogwarts, and we hate him. And he gets Harry in trouble, and we hate him. But then we find out a little bit about how terrible his life is as a literal slave, and we start to hate him a little bit less. But then he keeps hurting Harry. Literally, and like breaking his bones and stuff. So we hate him. But then we find out that he belongs to the Malfoys, and that makes you care about him a little bit more, and you hate him a little bit less. And we cap it off with Harry tricking Lucius into, say, this like slave plot hole and freeing Dobby with a sock. And Dobby repays Harry by protecting him from the retaliation attack from Lucius. And it's just a nice little arc that's pretty well developed alongside our main story. It has some peaks and valleys in it, and ultimately creates a character that after this book, where he's kind of very, very, very annoying, he kind of turns into a cool little character. And I kind of mean that literally and figuratively. He doesn't get a ton of book time, but he gets some book time and some key moments, and we see some really cool things from him to the point where we really start to care about him by the end of this, and then our hearts are ripped out of our chest. But they can only be ripped out of our chests if we actually care about him. And in this book, it's our introduction to him, and we don't for the longest time. We think he's awful until the end of the book, which to me is a nice development. Side plot, if you will, development. So, what about the best plot twist in the book? This is Lockhart. Again, trying not to go with the obviouses here. I am Lord Voldemort would be obvious. The best plot twist that isn't the biggest plot twist that was written is Lockhart. We knew he was an idiot, like immediately, and a fraud. But to find out that he got where he is by manipulating the memories of real life heroes, and then he spun that into a best-selling author career and profited from it, he's sadistic. And I did not see that shit coming the first time around reading these books. And I'm still, even though I know it's coming, each time it hits that moment in this book, it like twists me up inside to the point where like I have this just burning hatred for this character when he's about to try to wipe the memories of Ron and Harry for his so that he isn't outed as a fraud. And then he speaks as if he's going to turn it into a book. He's going to let Ginny die. He's going to show up with a completely mind-boggled Harry and Ron and be like, they lost their mind at the sight of the basilisk, but I saved them. And he's going to turn this into a huge book that you know would be massively read and massively profitable because it's about how Harry Potter lost his mind and Gilderoy Lockhart saved his life. And I'm sure it would have lots and lots and lots of detail about shit that never happened in it. And it makes me angry. I haven't had most of this written in my notes. It just makes me angry every time I get to that point of the story. And up until that, he's just kind of a bumbling idiot. Until he's not. And that's a hell of a plot twist, if you ask me. Next. These awards are going to be somewhat random. Some of them, they should sound fairly familiar from the first Bingies that I did from the first book, Sorcerers, aka Philosopher's Stone. The first one I kept, the Total Badassery Award. And this one is a name that you've probably been waiting on for a little while, but I felt this was the most appropriate place to put it. And it's Ginny. 11 years old, literally being attacked on a daily basis by the darkest wizard of the age, a serial killer who has weaponized a Horcrux, trying to suck the soul from her body. And she not only lives, but she figures it out, and she tries to stop it. Now, she's a child in a children's book, so trying to flush it down a toilet was not the best call here. But she tried. She did something to try to stop it and get rid of this book so it couldn't hurt anybody else. Should she have gone to Dumbledore when she realized what was happening? Yeah, she should have. But, particularly in these first two books, we have to make sure that Dumbledore isn't able to save the day. And so, he can't know about any of this. Otherwise, he would just save the day. I may have something to say about that if you got me on that tangent. Perhaps. But the fact that she went back to the diary after stealing it from Harry is something that the fandom is always going to have to talk about. And so I want to address it here because I am of the belief, again, this is a headcanon in my belief, but I believe that the Horcrux had taken such a hold on her soul by this point in the book after possessing her so many times and truly using her soul to feed itself to become stronger and stronger and more in control, that it essentially had a manipulative property that didn't need her to write in the diary anymore in order to possess her. Just her possessing it, having it in her possession, was enough for it to possess her. So because I've heard people say that the fact that she took the diary from Harry in order to save Harry, another badass moment, but then she started writing in it again, was just very, very stupid. And I would agree with that. And that's why I don't think that's what actually happened. I think that her taking it back from Harry and just having it was enough. And it was able to possess her again and then, drag her to the Chamber of Secrets, and away we go with our book. Either way you cut this whole thing, Ginny, and even just being alive at the end of this book, is a total badass. Now, the next award that I'm going to give away is the Dumbest Shit That I'd Forgotten About award. And this one's kind of a new award. It's a little bit of a spin-off of a different one that I gave away in the first book. And this one, I'm sorry, my inner child is going to come out right now. And by child, I mean like teenage me. It's the Percy jerking off red herring. It wasn't something that I'd forgotten about necessarily, but it definitely wasn't at the forefront of my mind when I went back to this book. And once it came up that Ginny had walked in on him doing something embarrassing, I laughed like a middle school boy. And then it plays out, and it's this little mini story arc, and it's just hilarious the whole time, because if you have a dirty mind like mine, you think that it's all about her walking in on Percy pleasuring himself. And of course, it turns out that he was making out with a girl and not that. So we do still get a payoff to that, and we get something for the next book that the twins have to give him shit about. And I'm immature sometimes, and I laughed at it. And it's the dumbest shit that I'd kind of forgotten about. And it made me laugh. So it got its own award in the silly award episode, because this whole thing, I mean, come on, it's kind of silly. Speaking of silly, I got one more for you. And it is the Dumbest Plot Device award. And this came down to two for me, and they're actually in the form of characters in some way. And it was either going to be Fawkes the Phoenix or Hermione. I'm going with Hermione on this one. Specifically, the little piece of paper that she has crumpled in her hand while she's petrified, and the idea that nobody would have seen it in the days, weeks, months, I don't know, what's it been that she was laying in that bed in the hospital wing, receiving medical attention and being, scanned over and looked over and investigated, if you will. Nobody found the little piece of paper in her hand, but Harry just happened to see it. Nobody else could have. And that's ultimately the key to getting everything to fall into place so that they can actually save the day. And it is dumb plot convenience in a children's book. And that just is what it is. And that is all I've got for you this time. Better late than never, but we have finally wrapped up Chamber of Secrets. So, what now? Well, on the Harry Potter binge, we're going back into Prisoner of Azkaban. So I figured the way that we're going to do this, since I did miss some time, I guess, and I didn't miss time, but we started doing some topics instead of the chapters. And I thought that was really, I thought it was well timed. I thought that it was needed for the podcast to kind of break up the chapters and give you different material, if you will. And quite frankly, it led to two of the most successful episodes I've ever had with Eric, in that history lesson and fandom deep dive, which had something to do with why we were doing topics in the first place. Peek behind the curtain, was lining some of that stuff up. So I thought it was needed. I thought it was great. I thought it was refreshing, and I hope that you agree. I hope you enjoyed it too, and I hope you're as excited like me to jump back into the actual binge of the book, because ultimately that's what we're here for on Belated Binge, to be the core and crux, not to be a core crux, if you will, of the podcast. It's the binge aspect. So I don't want to stray too far away from that, even if we do, throw in some topics here and there. But I thought that it was now a good time to get back into the flow of the chapter by chapters in Prisoner of Azkaban. So I figure the way that we'll do that is we will set it up in the next Harry Potter episode of this podcast, with kind of recapping where we are after the first 5 chapters of that book, in those episodes that have already been released. And in that, I will just, like I said, do a little recap of where we are in the book, but I'll also share some of the responses that I've gotten from you on those expecto plot changeo questions so far. And we'll from there we'll kick off the chapter episodes. And I'm getting guests lined up. People are still claiming chapters that they want to come on for. Trying to get as many of those scheduled as I possibly can. I'm trying to get some voices that you're familiar with, and as well as some new ones into the mix. And of course, I'm sure that that there will be some chapters that I'm doing by myself as well, and you'll get me kind of going down the nerd rabbit hole and making fun of things as I normally would. And it won't be all guests, and it won't be all just me. I'm excited, and I hope you are. And thank you for listening to this Bingies episode. And reminder to please let me know your thoughts on the show format and the questions that I asked earlier in this episode. Again, links to everything in the show notes. I'm doing this for you, so I want it to be delivered to you in the way that best suits as many of you as possible. Thanks again, and thank you for telling all of your Potterhead friends how much cooler they would be if they joined us on this belated binge of Harry Potter.